The crystal chandelier hung like a frozen constellation above the marble floors of Lumiere, casting fractured rainbows across tables draped in pristine white linen. This was no ordinary restaurant. It was a temple of luxury, where reservations required 3 months' notice and a credit card with no limit. Every fork was polished to mirror shine. Every napkin folded into geometric perfection. Every smile from the staff was rehearsed, measured, and hollow. But beneath the glittering surface, something had rotted. Vivian Vance stood in the center of the dining room like a general surveying her battlefield. At 42, she had perfected the art of intimidation. Her ash-blonde hair was pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to stretch her skin, giving her face a perpetual expression of barely contained fury. Her makeup was a mask, foundation applied with the precision of war paint, lipstick the color of fresh blood. She wore a black pencil skirt and a cream silk blouse that whispered money with every movement. But it was her shoes that truly announced her presence, black Louboutin stilettos with heels like daggers, clicking against the floor with the rhythm of an executioner's march. Click, clack, click, clack. Every employee in Lumiere knew that sound. It meant inspection. It meant someone was about to be humiliated. Elena Rostova was wiping down table 7 when she heard it. Her heart clenched like a fist. She was 22, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron, hung slightly loose on her thin frame. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days, saving every dollar for her mother's medication. The arthritis treatment didn't come cheap, and the nursing program tuition was due next week. Elena. Vivian's voice sliced through the air like a blade. Elena turned, clutching her cleaning cloth like a shield. Yes, Miss Vance. Vivian approached, her nose wrinkling as if she'd detected something foul. She ran one perfectly manicured finger along the edge of the table, then held it up to the light. A single speck of dust clung to her fingertip. Disgusting, Vivian pronounced, her voice dripping with theatrical horror. She showed the finger to Chloe, her assistant manager, who stood nearby with her arms crossed and a smirk on her face. Do you see this, Chloe? This is what happens when we hire charity cases. Absolutely appalling, Chloe echoed, her voice honey-sweet and venomous. Elena's face burned. I'm sorry, Miss Vance. I'll clean it again right now. Oh, you'll clean it, Vivian interrupted, examining her manicure with exaggerated disinterest. And since you clearly need motivation, I'm docking half your day's wages. Perhaps poverty will teach you what training couldn't, attention to detail. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Half her wages meant she couldn't pay for her mother's prescription refill. It meant another week of stretching rice and beans, another week of walking to campus instead of taking the bus to save $2. Please, Elena whispered, hating the way her voice trembled. My mother. Your mother is not my concern, Vivian said, turning away with a dismissive wave. Your performance is. And right now, darling, you're performing like a homeless person in a Michelin-starred restaurant. Do better or find employment more suited to your limited capabilities. Chloe snickered. Elena wanted to cry, but she'd learned long ago that tears only made Vivian hungrier. Instead, she swallowed the lump in her throat and bent over the table, polishing it until her reflection stared back at her, blurred and broken. From the kitchen doorway, old Marcus, the sous chef, watched with sad eyes. He'd worked at Lumiere for 15 years, back when it had a soul. Back before Vivian Vance had turned it into a showcase for cruelty disguised as excellence. This was how every shift began. With humiliation. With fear. With the slow erosion of dignity. And it was about to get worse. 3,000 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Julian Thorne stood before a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city breathe beneath him. At 28, he was absurdly wealthy and uncomfortably aware of it. The Thorne Hospitality Group owned 43 luxury establishments worldwide, hotels, restaurants, private clubs. His grandfather had built the empire from nothing. His father had expanded it. And now Julian, whether he wanted it or not, was expected to maintain the legacy. He turned from the window to face his laptop, where a spreadsheet glowed with angry red numbers. Lumiere, the flagship restaurant in San Francisco, was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Online reviews told a consistent story, beautiful but soulless. Staff treated us like we were bothering them. Overpriced and underwhelming. The manager is a nightmare. Julian's assistant, Marcus Chin, stood nearby with a tablet. Sir, we could send in a consultant team. Maybe implement new training protocols. No, Julian said quietly. He'd been thinking about this for weeks. I'm going myself. Marcus blinked. To San Francisco? Undercover. Julian pulled a worn hoodie from his gym bag, holding it up like a costume. I need to see what's really happening. Not what they show the executives during inspections. The truth. With respect, sir, you could just fire the manager. Vivian Vance has been. I need to understand why the culture went toxic, Julian interrupted. You can't fix a wound you haven't examined. He smiled grimly. Besides, when was the last time someone at my level experienced what our customers actually experience, especially customers who don't arrive in limousines? Marcus looked skeptical, but didn't argue. Julian Thorne had inherited his grandfather's stubbornness along with his fortune. Once he decided something, hell itself couldn't change his mind. That night, Julian packed a small bag. He left behind his Rolex, his designer wallet, his tailored suits. He dressed in faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, and that old university hoodie that had survived a decade. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. He looked ordinary, forgettable, poor. It was perfect. Julian had taken private jets so often he'd forgotten what commercial flying felt like. But he wanted the full experience, so he booked economy. The middle seat. No priority boarding. The flight attendant barely glanced at him as he shuffled down the narrow aisle, bumping his backpack against seat after seat. A businessman in first class looked at him with undisguised contempt as Julian passed, as if poverty might be contagious. Welcome to the other side, Julian thought grimly. At San Francisco International, he skipped the town car service and rode the BART train into the city. The subway car smelled like a mixture of disinfectant and despair. A woman with too many shopping bags blocked the aisle. A man shouted into his phone about child support. Julian found a spot near the door, holding the grimy handrail and watching the city blur past. He'd grown up with privilege, but his grandfather had grown up with nothing. Old Samuel Thorne used to tell stories about washing dishes in a New York diner, sleeping on a friend's couch, eating ketchup soup when money ran out. Never forget where you came from, Samuel would say, his voice rough with memory. And never forget that money doesn't make you better than anyone. It just makes you luckier. Julian had listened to those stories, but hearing them was different from living them. Today, for the first time in his adult life, he was invisible. People didn't see Julian Thorne, billionaire CEO. They saw a nobody in a hoodie, and they treated him accordingly. When he finally emerged onto the street where Lumiere stood, the sun was setting, painting the buildings gold. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a historic building, its facade all glass and elegant signage. Through the windows, Julian could see the dining room, expensive, beautiful, empty of warmth. He took a breath and walked toward the entrance. Here we go. The doorman was a young man in a crisp uniform, his face professionally blank. As Julian approached, that blankness shifted to something else, wariness, perhaps. Distaste. Good evening, Julian said politely. Table for one, please. The doorman's eyes traveled from Julian's scuffed shoes to his wrinkled hoodie, then back up to his unshaven face. Do you have a reservation? No, but I was hoping. We require reservations, the doorman interrupted smoothly. Preferably made several weeks in advance. His tone suggested that people who looked like Julian wouldn't have made such reservations anyway. Julian felt a flicker of anger, but he suppressed it. This was exactly what he'd come to witness. I understand, but surely you have walk-in seating? Even just at the bar. The doorman's expression hardened. Sir, Lumiere maintains certain standards. We ask that our guests dress appropriately for the dining experience. Translation: You're too poor to eat here. Before Julian could respond, A new voice cut through the evening air like a whip crack. "What's the problem, David?" Vivian Vance appeared in the doorway, backlit by the restaurant's golden interior. Julian's first impression was of a bird of prey, sharp, immaculate, dangerous. She looked at Julian the way someone might look at a cockroach on a wedding cake. "This gentleman was inquiring about a table," David said carefully. Vivian's gaze raked over Julian with undisguised contempt. Her lip curled slightly. "We don't serve loiterers," she said coldly. "This is a 5-star establishment, not a shelter." The words were designed to wound, and they succeeded. Julian felt heat rise in his chest. But he kept his voice steady. "I'm not loitering. I'm a customer who would like to have dinner." "Customers dress appropriately," Vivian retorted. "Customers make reservations. Customers don't show up looking like they've been sleeping under a bridge." She turned to David. "Escort him away from the entrance. He's bad for business." This was it. Julian was about to reveal himself, to put this venomous woman in her place. "Wait." A soft voice, barely above a whisper. Julian turned to see a young woman emerging from inside the restaurant. She wore a server's uniform, and her eyes held a mixture of fear and determination. Elena Rostova looked at Vivian, then at Julian, then back at Vivian. "He's with me," Elena said quietly. Vivian's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Excuse me. He's my cousin," Elena lied, her fingers twisting the corner of her apron. "From out of town. I forgot to mention he was coming." The lie hung in the air like a fragile soap bubble. Julian watched Vivian's face cycle through several expressions: surprise, suspicion, disgust, before settling on cold anger. "Your cousin." Vivian's voice could have frozen vodka. "How convenient." "Please, Miss Vance," Elena pleaded. "He won't cause any trouble. I'll seat him in my section." "I'll make sure." "You'll make sure he doesn't steal the silverware?" Vivian interrupted. She studied Julian with renewed interest, as if trying to determine just how poor he really was. Finally, she waved a dismissive hand. "Fine. Seat your cousin in the back corner, far from our actual guests. And Elena." Her smile was all teeth. "His behavior is your responsibility." "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, ma'am." Vivian swept back inside, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and malice. David the doorman stepped aside reluctantly, and Elena gestured for Julian to follow her. As they entered the restaurant, Julian leaned close to her. "You didn't have to do that." Elena didn't meet his eyes. "I know what it's like to be judged by your clothes," she whispered. "Come on." Before she changes her mind. Elena led Julian through the dining room, acutely aware of the stares following them. The other servers watched with a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. Chloe, Vivian's assistant, smirked openly. The few diners who'd arrived early for their reservations glanced at Julian with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. The table Elena chose was in the furthest corner of the restaurant, partially hidden by a decorative screen. It was the worst table in the house, near the kitchen door, away from the windows, cramped and poorly lit. "I'm sorry it's not better," Elena murmured as Julian sat down. "It's perfect," Julian said honestly. From here, he could observe everything without being observed himself. "Thank you for what you did out there." Elena's hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her notepad. "It's okay. I couldn't watch her turn someone away like that. Like you're not even human." She finally met his eyes, and Julian saw a weariness there that didn't belong on such a young face. "Can I get you something to drink while you decide on dinner?" "Water would be great." Elena nodded and disappeared. Julian watched her navigate the dining room, her movements quick and nervous, like a deer expecting predators. When she returned, she carried not just water, but a basket of bread, crusty rolls that smelled like heaven. "This isn't on the menu as complimentary," Julian noted, confused. A faint blush colored Elena's cheeks. "I know, but you look like you could use it." Before he could respond, she'd vanished again. Julian stared at the bread basket, something warm and painful expanding in his chest. This girl, who clearly had nothing to spare, had just given him something she didn't have to. Something that, based on Vivian's earlier behavior, would probably cost her if anyone noticed. He took a roll. It was perfect, crispy outside, soft inside. The butter melted into golden rivers. And somehow it tasted better than anything he'd eaten in his penthouse, better than any Michelin-starred meal. Because it came with kindness. Across the room, Vivian watched Elena return to the kitchen. Her eyes narrowed. She crooked a finger at Chloe. "Keep an eye on that table," Vivian murmured. "Something about this doesn't feel right." Chloe grinned. "You think he's going to cause trouble?" "I think Elena is going to regret her little act of charity." Vivian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "And I'm going to enjoy every second of it." 20 minutes later, Elena returned to take Julian's order. Her notepad was covered in small, neat handwriting, reminders, calculations, little notes to herself. Julian noticed one margin note: "Mom's prescription, $87. "Have you decided?" Elena asked softly. Julian scanned the menu. Everything was absurdly expensive. A simple salad cost $40. The pasta dishes started at $60. And there, at the top of the entree section, was the crown jewel, truffle risotto, $200. In his real life, Julian wouldn't have blinked at such a price. But right now, dressed as he was, that price tag was obscene. It was more than Elena probably made in a week. It was designed to exclude people, to separate the worthy from the unworthy. "Perfect. I'll have the truffle risotto," Julian said. Elena's pen paused over her notepad. She looked at him, really looked at him, trying to reconcile the worn hoodie with the expensive order. It's our most expensive." "I know," Julian said gently. "I've been saving up for a nice meal. Special occasion." It was another lie, but a kind one. Elena nodded slowly and wrote down the order. As she walked toward the kitchen, Julian saw her glance back at him with something like concern. Near the bar, Vivian was reviewing the seating chart with Chloe when she noticed the order ticket print out. She snatched it from the printer, her eyes widening. "The homeless cousin ordered the truffle risotto?" Vivian's laugh was sharp and delighted. "Oh, this is going to be spectacular. You think he can't pay?" Chloe asked, already anticipating the drama. "I think," Vivian said slowly, savoring each word, "that our dear Elena is about to learn a very expensive lesson about who deserves our charity." She pulled out her phone, already composing a text to David the doorman. "Make sure he doesn't leave before the bill comes. I want to be there for this." In the kitchen, Elena handed the ticket to Chef Marcus. The old man read it and raised an eyebrow. "Your cousin, huh?" he said quietly. "Please don't ask," Elena whispered. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll make it perfect," he promised. Because if this was going to end badly, and his gut told him it would, at least the poor kid would get one spectacular meal first. Julian sat in his corner, sipping water and watching the theater unfold around him. The restaurant was filling up now. Wealthy couples in designer clothes. Business executives closing deals over wine. Everyone performing the ritual of fine dining, the studied examination of menus, the pretentious discussion of wine pairings, the careful arrangement of faces into expressions of refined enjoyment. And presiding over it all, like a dark queen over her court, was Vivian Vance. Julian watched her move from table to table, her personality shifting like a chameleon. With the wealthy guests, she was all charm, warm smiles, attentive questions, recommendations delivered in a conspiratorial whisper. But with the staff, with Elena especially, she was ice and thorns. This was what his grandfather had built? This temple to snobbery and cruelty? No. This was what happened when people forgot the purpose of hospitality. When they confused luxury with worth. When they started believing that money could buy the right to look down on other human beings. The risotto arrived 30 minutes later, and it was a work of art. The rice was perfectly al dente, swimming in a cream sauce studded with black truffle shavings. The aroma was intoxicating. Elena set it down carefully, her eyes worried. "Enjoy," she said softly. Julian took a bite. It was spectacular, rich, earthy, complex. Worth every penny of that absurd price tag, if food could ever really be worth such things. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that across the room, Vivian and Chloe were watching him like vultures waiting for a dying animal. They didn't have to wait long. Julian finished the last bite of risotto and leaned back, genuinely satisfied. The food had been excellent. The service, from Elena at least, had been kind. And he'd learned everything he needed to know about what was wrong with Lumiere. Now came the moment of truth. Elena approached with the check, presenting it in a leather folder. "Whenever you're ready," she said softly. "No rush." Julian opened the folder. The total glowed at the bottom of the itemized receipt, $237.50, including tax and suggested gratuity. He reached for his back pocket, where his wallet should have been. Nothing. A cold wave of realization washed over him. The wallet. His real wallet, with his credit cards and ID and cash, was in his other jeans. The jeans he'd left hanging in his hotel room closet. In his rush to get into character, to fully commit to this disguise, he'd forgotten the most essential prop. He was a billionaire with no way to pay for a $237 meal. Julian's heart began to pound. He checked his front pockets. His hoodie pocket. Even though he knew the wallet wasn't there, panic made him search again. And again. His palms were sweating. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan. Elena noticed his distress. "Is everything okay?" Julian's voice came out rough. "I seem to have forgotten my wallet." The words hung in the air between them like an executioner's blade. Elena's face went pale. Across the room, Chloe's head snapped up, her predator instincts triggered by the scent of disaster. "Oh no," Elena whispered. "Are you sure? Maybe check again?" Julian went through the motions, even though he knew it was futile. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how I could go back to where I'm staying. It's not far. I could bring the money back." But even as he said it, he knew how it sounded. Every restaurant had heard that excuse 1,000 times. Every con artist and dine and dasher had made that promise. And in this moment, wearing these clothes, with this stubble and this mess of hair, Julian looked exactly like what Vivian had called him. A con artist. A thief. A bum. Elena. Chloe's voice cut through their quiet conversation like a siren. She was striding toward them, Vivian close behind, both women wearing expressions of vindicated satisfaction. "Problem with the check?" "No, Elena started." "He can't pay," Chloe announced loudly enough that nearby tables turned to look. "Your cousin can't pay for his meal." Vivian arrived, and her smile was the most genuine expression Julian had seen on her face all evening. She looked at the check, then at Julian, then back at the check. $237, she said slowly, as if savoring a fine wine. "That's quite a lot of money for someone who apparently doesn't have any." Julian stood up, trying to maintain his dignity. "Ma'am, I apologize. There's been a genuine mistake. If you'll just allow me to." "Allow you to what?" Vivian interrupted, her voice rising with theatrical outrage. "Run away? Disappear? We've heard every sob story, every excuse. Do you think we're stupid?" "I don't think anything of the sort," Julian said carefully. "I'm simply asking for free food." Vivian snapped. She turned to the gathered staff and a few curious diners, raising her voice to ensure everyone heard. "This is what happens when we let our bleeding heart employees bring in strays. This is why we have dress codes and reservation policies. To keep out the grifters and the thieves." Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "Miss Vance, please. He's not a thief. He just forgot." "Forgot?" Vivian's laugh was like breaking glass. "Darling, one doesn't forget $237. One comes to a restaurant knowing full well that they can't pay, orders the most expensive item on the menu, and hopes that sympathy or stupidity will let them get away with it." She focused her attention back on Julian, her eyes glittering with malicious joy. "Well, we're not that stupid. And we're certainly not sympathetic." Julian felt his face burning. This was humiliation, pure and calculated. Vivian wasn't just confronting a potential thief, she was enjoying it. Performing it. Using him as an example, a cautionary tale, a source of entertainment. And the worst part? From her perspective, she was absolutely right. He looked like a con artist. He'd ordered expensive food while dressed like someone who couldn't afford it. He had no wallet, no ID, no way to prove who he really was. Chloe pulled out her phone with exaggerated slowness. Should I call the police, Miss Vance? I'm sure they'd be very interested in this. Actually, Vivian said, holding up one manicured hand, let's give our thief here one more chance to explain himself. After all, we're not monsters. Her smile suggested otherwise. So tell me, sir, how exactly did you plan to pay for your lovely meal? What was the plan here? The dining room had gone silent. Everyone was watching now. This was the entertainment portion of the evening, apparently. A public execution disguised as justice. Julian opened his mouth to explain, to reveal himself, to end this nightmare. But before he could speak, another voice interrupted. I'll pay for him. Elena stepped forward, reaching into her apron pocket. Time seemed to slow down. Julian watched as Elena pulled out a small, worn envelope, the kind that usually held birthday cards or grocery lists. Her hands were shaking as she opened it, revealing a stack of crumpled bills. Ones, fives, a few tens. Money that had been folded and refolded, carried close, counted anxiously. Don't, Julian said sharply. Elena, don't do this. But Elena wasn't looking at him. She was counting the bills with fierce concentration, her lips moving silently. When she finished, she smoothed them out as best she could and held them toward Vivian. $240, Elena said quietly. It's enough to cover the bill and a tip. The room erupted in whispers. Vivian stared at the money as if Elena had just offered her a handful of cockroaches. Chloe's mouth fell open in genuine shock. You can't be serious, Vivian finally said. I'm serious, Elena replied, though her voice wavered. Take it. He doesn't deserve to be arrested. It was an honest mistake. An honest mistake. Vivian repeated the words slowly, her face transforming from shock to something far more dangerous, rage. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculated fury of someone whose authority has been challenged. You're paying for this. This criminal, with your own money? He's not a criminal. He ordered food he couldn't pay for. Vivian's voice rose to a shriek. Several diners actually flinched. That is theft. And you stupid little girl, are enabling him. Julian grabbed Elena's wrist gently, stopping her from extending the money further. Please, he said quietly. Don't sacrifice yourself for this. But Elena pulled away, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She thrust the money at Vivian. Just take it. Please. This doesn't have to be. Vivian slapped the bills out of Elena's hand. The money exploded into the air, floating down like dirty snow. Ones and fives scattered across the floor. A $10 bill landed in someone's water glass. The entire restaurant gasped. How dare you, Vivian hissed, her face contorted with rage. How dare you undermine me like this? You think this is kindness? This is stupidity. This is defiance. You're choosing this trash, over your job? Over the rules? Over me? Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick up the scattered money. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry, I just couldn't. Get up, Vivian commanded. Elena froze, a fistful of crumpled bills clutched in her hand. I said get up. Vivian's voice had gone quiet again, which was somehow more terrifying than her shouting. Look at me. Slowly, Elena stood. Her legs were shaking. Mascara ran down her cheeks in dark rivers. Vivian reached for Elena's name tag, a simple plastic rectangle pinned to her apron, and ripped it off with such force that the pin scratched Elena's collarbone. A thin line of blood appeared. You're fired, Vivian said, enunciating each word with crystal clarity. Effective immediately. For gross insubordination, for fraternizing with criminals, and for being exactly what I always suspected you were, trash trying to pretend it belongs somewhere nice. Ms. Vance, please. Chef Marcus had emerged from the kitchen, his face stricken. Marcus, unless you'd like to join her in the unemployment line, I suggest you return to your station. Vivian didn't even glance at him. Her eyes were locked on Elena like a snake mesmerizing a mouse. Elena Rostova, you have exactly 5 minutes to collect your things and leave my restaurant. If you're not gone by then, I will have security remove you forcibly. Do you understand? Elena couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears dripping off her chin. And take your friend with you, Vivian added, gesturing dismissively at Julian. Before I decide to press charges after all. The back office of Lumiere was small and cluttered with delivery schedules, employee timesheets, and the detritus of restaurant management. Elena's locker was number 7, stuck with a combination lock that her trembling fingers could barely manage. Julian had followed her, despite her whispered protests. Now he stood in the doorway, watching her pack her few belongings into a canvas tote bag. A spare pair of shoes. A cardigan for when the air conditioning got too cold. A small photo in a plastic frame, Elena and an older woman with the same storm cloud eyes, both smiling. Is that your mother? Julian asked quietly. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. The prescription you were saving for. How much do you need? It doesn't matter now, Elena said, her voice hollow. She zipped the bag closed and turned to face him. Her eyes were red and puffy, but she'd stopped crying. Now she just looked exhausted. Defeated. I lost my job trying to help you. I lost the money I'd been saving. And tomorrow I have to figure out how to explain to my mother that I can't afford her medication this month because I decided to be a good person. The words hit Julian like physical blows. Elena. Don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. I don't want your apologies or your gratitude or whatever you think you owe me. I want you to understand something. She stepped closer, and despite her tears, despite her defeat, there was steel in her voice. That money? The $240? That was 3 weeks of tips. That was me walking an extra hour to campus instead of taking the bus. That was me eating rice and canned vegetables for dinner every night. That was me telling my mother I'd already eaten when I visited, so she wouldn't worry. Julian felt sick. I gave it to you, Elena continued, because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to be judged by what you're wearing, by how much money is in your pocket, by whether people think you deserve basic human decency. And I couldn't, her voice broke. I couldn't just stand there and watch her do to you what she does to people like us every single day. People like us, Julian repeated softly. People who don't matter, Elena said. People who are invisible until we make a mistake, and then suddenly everyone can see us. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone knows exactly what we deserve. She picked up her bag. So yeah, I made a choice. I chose to help someone who needed help. And maybe it was stupid. Maybe I should have kept my head down and my mouth shut and my money in my pocket. But at least I can look at myself in the mirror. She walked past him toward the door, then paused. I hope things get better for you. I really do. But please, don't come looking for me. I can't afford any more kindness. Julian watched her walk down the hallway toward the exit. He should stop her. Should tell her the truth. Should pull out his phone and call his assistant and fix this entire disaster with one conversation. But something stopped him. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was the realization that revealing himself now would only make it worse, would transform Elena's sacrifice into something she'd regret, would make her kindness seem foolish rather than noble. Or maybe, Julian thought with sudden clarity, he needed to see this through. Needed to understand fully what he'd created, what his negligence had allowed to fester in his own restaurant. Elena pushed through the back door into the alley. The San Francisco evening was cool and damp, fog rolling in from the bay. She took 3 steps, then stopped and leaned against the brick wall, finally allowing herself to completely fall apart. Inside, Julian pulled out his phone. Not to call his assistant. Not yet. First, he called an Uber and ran after Elena. Let me at least give you a ride home, he said when he found her. Please. Elena looked at him, this stranger she'd saved, this man she'd sacrificed everything for, and the absurdity of it all almost made her laugh. Almost. Fine, she said. But just a ride. Then I never want to see you again. They waited in silence for the car. When it arrived, Elena gave an address in the Sunset District, a neighborhood of aging apartment buildings and corner stores with bars on the windows. They rode without speaking, the city lights blurring past. When they reached her building, Elena got out quickly. But before she closed the door, Julian spoke. I will make this right, he said. I swear to you. I will make this right. Elena looked at him with something like pity. You can't, she said simply. Some things are just broken. But thank you for trying. The car door closed. Julian watched her climb the steps to her building, fumble with her keys, disappear inside. Then he gave the driver a new address, his hotel. He had phone calls to make, plans to put in motion. Tomorrow, Vivian Vance was going to learn what it meant to destroy an innocent person. Tomorrow, justice would arrive in a very expensive suit. Elena's apartment was a studio on the third floor, accessed by stairs that creaked with age and dampness. The space was smaller than some people's closets, a Murphy bed folded against one wall, a kitchenette with a hot plate and mini fridge, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But she'd made it home. Thrift store curtains in cheerful yellow. Plants on the windowsill that she'd grown from grocery store herb seedlings. Photos taped to the walls, her mother, her younger brother, her grandmother who'd passed 2 years ago. She dropped her bag on the floor and stood in the center of the room, not sure what to do with herself. The clock on the wall said 9:47 p.m. In a normal world, she'd be finishing her shift right now. She'd count her tips, calculate what she could afford for tomorrow, plan her route to campus for her early morning class. But this wasn't a normal world anymore. Elena pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed her mother's number. Lena. Her mother's voice was thick with medication and sleep. Sweetheart, it's late. Shouldn't you be at work? Mama, Elena said, and then couldn't continue. The words stuck in her throat like broken glass. What happened? Instantly, her mother was alert, worry sharpening her tone. Are you hurt? Are you safe? I'm fine, Elena managed. I lost my job tonight. Silence on the other end. Then, oh baby. I'm so sorry, Elena whispered. I know we needed that income. I know you're counting on me. There was a situation and I had to. Shoo, her mother soothed, the way she had when Elena was small and scared. We'll figure it out. We always do. Can you tell me what happened? Elena tried. She explained about the man in the hoodie, about Vivian's cruelty, about the choice she'd made. But even as she spoke, she knew how it sounded. Reckless. Stupid. She'd thrown away financial stability for a stranger. But her mother surprised her. You did the right thing, she said firmly. Mama. Elena Maria Rostova, you listen to me. Your grandmother, may she rest in peace, used to say that there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who see suffering and look away, and those who see it and step forward. You stepped forward. You saw someone being treated cruelly and you did something about it. That's not stupid. That's brave. Tears were streaming down Elena's face again. But your medication. We'll manage, her mother interrupted. I'll call Dr. Peterson. She's always said she could adjust the dosage if we needed to. And you'll find another job. You're smart, you're hardworking, you're kind. Someone will see that. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. So much. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is a new day. After they hung up, Elena sat on her folded bed and stared at her reflection in the dark window. She looked exhausted, defeated. But beneath that, there was something else. A tiny spark of defiance. Vivian Vance had taken her job, but she hadn't taken Elena's soul. Hadn't made her regret being kind. And, somehow, that felt like a small victory. Meanwhile, across the city in a luxury hotel suite, Julian Thorne was not sleeping. He sat at the desk with his laptop open, reviewing security camera footage that his assistant had remotely accessed from Lumiere's system. Marcus Chin had initially protested, "Sir, this feels like an invasion of privacy," but Julian had insisted. Now, watching the footage from tonight, Julian felt his rage growing with each passing minute. The video showed everything. Vivian's initial cruelty at the door. Elena's brave intervention. The meal, the confrontation, the scattered money. But there were other clips too, from previous days. Vivian screaming at a busboy for a minor mistake. Vivian making a junior server cry in the supply closet. Vivian accidentally knocking over Elena's purse and laughing as her belongings scattered. This wasn't management. This was tyranny. Julian opened a new document and began typing. By 2 a.m., he had a comprehensive plan. By 3 a.m., he had marshaled his resources. By 4 a.m., he'd made several phone calls to people who owed him favors. At 5 a.m., he finally slept, but only for a few hours. He had a performance to prepare for. The next morning, Elena woke to her alarm with a sense of disorientation. Her body expected to get ready for work, but there was no work to get ready for. She lay in bed for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to summon the energy to face the day. Her phone buzzed. A text from Natasha, one of the other servers at Lumiere. OMG, heard what happened. Vivian is horrible. Are you okay? Then another, from Chef Marcus. I'm so sorry, kiddo. That took guts. Call me if you need a reference. And another, from Chloe, Vivian's assistant. Hope it was worth it, loser. Good luck finding another job with that kind of attitude. Elena deleted Chloe's message and turned off her phone. She couldn't deal with this yet. Instead, she got dressed, not her uniform, just jeans and a sweater, and walked to the corner cafe where she sometimes treated herself to coffee on good days. Today was not a good day, but she needed the comfort. The cafe was run by an older Vietnamese woman named Mrs. Nguyen, who'd always been kind to Elena. When Elena walked in, Mrs. Nguyen took one look at her face and poured a large coffee without being asked. Rough night? She asked gently. Lost my job, Elena said, too tired to elaborate. Mrs. Nguyen made a sympathetic noise and pushed a croissant across the counter. On the house. You need strength today. This simple kindness almost broke Elena all over again. She managed to thank Mrs. Nguyen and took her coffee to a corner table where she could watch the city wake up through the window. People rushed past on their way to work. Business people in suits. Students with backpacks. Everyone moving with purpose, with direction, with certainty about where they were going. Elena felt adrift. Her phone buzzed again. Against her better judgment, she checked it. This time, the message was from an unknown number. This is Julian. Please don't delete this. I know you said you never wanted to see me again, but I need you to trust me for just one more day. Stay near your phone. Please. Elena stared at the message. Part of her wanted to block the number and forget the man who'd cost her everything. But another part, the part that had seen something genuine in his eyes last night, hesitated. She typed back, "Why should I trust you?" The response came quickly, "Because you believed in kindness when no one else did. I'm asking you to believe in it one more time. Just until noon. Please." Elena sighed and pocketed her phone. She had nothing else to do today anyway. Might as well see what this mysterious message was about. She had no idea that across the city, Julian Thorne was preparing for the performance of his lifetime. At Lumiere, the morning began like any other. The staff arrived at 10 a.m. for the pre-lunch meeting. Vivian stood at the front of the dining room, her hair in its signature tight bun, her makeup flawless, her expression one of smug satisfaction. "Before we open," she announced, "I want to address yesterday's incident. Some of you may have heard that I terminated Elena Rostova's employment." A few staff members shifted uncomfortably. Chef Marcus stared at the floor, his jaw tight. "I want you all to understand why," Vivian continued. "Elena chose to enable criminal behavior. She chose a stranger over the integrity of this establishment. She demonstrated the kind of bleeding heart foolishness that has no place in a five-star restaurant." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Let her termination be a lesson. In this restaurant, loyalty to me, to the standards I've established, is non-negotiable. Excellence is mandatory. Weakness is unacceptable. Are we clear?" A chorus of reluctant "yes, Ms. Vance" echoed through the room. "Good," Vivian said, her smile sharp. "Now let's prepare for another day of perfection." But perfection was about to be interrupted. At 11:15 a.m., exactly 45 minutes before opening, the front door opened. Vivian turned, ready to inform whoever it was that they were closed, when she stopped dead. 3 black Mercedes S-Class sedans had pulled up to the curb outside. The kind of cars that meant serious money. The kind that made Vivian's instincts shift from annoyance to anticipation. A driver opened the rear door of the center car, and Julian Thorne stepped out. Gone was the hoodie and stubble. Today, Julian wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that had been tailored in Milan. His hair was styled, his jaw clean-shaven. A Patek Philippe watch gleamed at his wrist. He wore success like a second skin, his posture radiating authority and wealth. Behind him emerged Marcus Chin and 3 other executives from Thorn Hospitality Group's corporate office. Vivian's eyes widened. She recognized that level of wealth instantly, had spent her career cultivating the ability to identify it at 20 paces. These were important people. VIPs. The kind of customers who could make or break a restaurant's reputation. She rushed to the door, smoothing her skirt, arranging her face into its most dazzling smile. "Gentlemen," she called out, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. "Welcome to Lumiere. I'm Vivian Vance, the general manager. We're not quite open yet, but for guests of your caliber, we would be delighted to make an exception." Julian removed his sunglasses and looked directly at her. Vivian's smile froze. Her brain struggled to reconcile the elegant man before her with the trash from last night. It couldn't be the same person. Couldn't possibly be. "Miss Vance," Julian said, his voice cold and professional. "Do you recognize me?" The color drained from Vivian's face. Her hand, extended for a handshake, trembled slightly before she pulled it back. Around her, the staff who'd been setting up for lunch service had gone completely still, watching with wide eyes. I'm not sure Vivian stammered, her usual composure cracking. "Allow me to refresh your memory," Julian said. He took a step forward, and Vivian instinctively took a step back. "Last night, I was wearing different clothes. A faded hoodie, I believe. Old jeans. You called me trash. A loiterer. A bum. You said this restaurant didn't serve my kind." The staff gasped. Chef Marcus's eyes went wide with sudden understanding. Chloe, standing near the bar, looked like she might faint. Vivian's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Her brain was short-circuiting, trying desperately to find a way out of this nightmare. "Of course," Julian continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling the entire room, "you were very gracious to one person last night. Do you remember her? A young waitress named Elena Rostova. She intervened on my behalf. She showed me kindness when you showed me contempt. And for that crime, you fired her." "I can explain," Vivian began. "You can explain to HR," Julian interrupted. He nodded to Marcus Chin, who stepped forward with a tablet. "My name is Julian Thorn. I am the CEO of Thorn Hospitality Group. Which means I own this restaurant. Which means I own this building. Which means, Ms. Vance, I own the position you currently occupy." The tablet screen showed Julian's corporate ID, his photo, his credentials. There was no denying it. No escaping it. Vivian's legs actually wobbled. She reached out to steady herself against a chair. "Currently occupied," Julian repeated, being the operative word. "Mr. Thorn, please." Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. All her venom, all her cruelty, all her superiority had evaporated, leaving only fear. "I didn't know. How could I have known? You weren't dressed you looked like someone who didn't deserve basic human decency," Julian finished. "Like someone you could humiliate for your own entertainment? Like someone whose suffering was less important than your authority." Vivian's carefully constructed mask was completely gone now. Mascara smudged at the corners of her eyes. Her lipstick seemed too bright against her suddenly pale face. "Please," she whispered. "I have a mortgage. I have bills. I've worked in this industry for 20 years. 20 years, Julian mused. "And in those 20 years, how many people did you treat the way you treated me last night? How many employees did you terrorize? How many customers did you turn away because they didn't meet your standards of worthiness?" He gestured to Marcus Chin, who pulled up another screen on the tablet. Security footage began to play clip after clip of Vivian's cruelty. Vivian screaming at staff. Vivian mocking customers behind their backs. Vivian deliberately sabotaging Elena's sections to make her fail. "I've been reviewing footage from the past 6 months," Julian said. "Would you like to know what I found? A pattern of harassment, discrimination, and abuse of power. You created a culture of fear in MY Restaurant. You betrayed every principle my grandfather built this company on. I was maintaining standards." Vivian protested, desperately trying to find solid ground. "This is a 5-star establishment. We can't just let anyone. Anyone? Julian's voice finally rose, and the sheer force of his anger made Vivian flinch. You mean people who don't look wealthy enough? People who don't dress expensively enough? People who remind you of what you're so desperately trying to escape? Vivian's face crumpled. Julian had hit something true and painful, and they both knew it. My grandfather, Julian said, his voice dropping back to that cold, controlled tone, started this company by washing dishes in a restaurant not unlike this one. He was an immigrant with nothing but hope and determination. He built Thorn Hospitality on the belief that luxury should elevate people, not exclude them. That excellence in service meant treating every human being with dignity. He took another step forward. Vivian had nowhere to retreat. You've corrupted that vision, Julian continued. You've turned this restaurant into a monument to snobbery and cruelty. You've hurt good people for no reason other than that you could. And worst of all, you did it in my name. Under my brand. Using my resources. I'm sorry, Vivian whispered, tears now streaming down her face, destroying her perfect makeup. I'm so sorry. Please. I'll change. I'll do better. I'll apologize to everyone. You're fired, Julian said simply. The words echoed in the silent restaurant. Effective immediately, you are terminated from your position. You will receive 2 weeks severance as per your contract, but that's a courtesy, not a right. You will also be placed on an industry blacklist. Every major hospitality group in the country will know what you did here. You will never manage a restaurant again. Vivian's legs gave out completely. She sank into the chair, sobbing openly now, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. But that's not all, Julian said. He turned to address the gathered staff. Everyone who witnessed Ms. Vance's behavior and said nothing, who enabled it, who participated in it, you have a choice to make. You can change. You can commit to treating every person who walks through that door with respect. Or you can follow Vivian out the door. Your decision. He looked directly at Chloe, who was pale and shaking. Ms. Harper, I believe you sent a rather cruel text message to Elena Rostova this morning. Something about her attitude. Chloe's eyes widened. How did you? Elena forwarded it to me, Julian said coldly. Along with several other communications that demonstrate your complicity in creating a hostile work environment. You're also terminated. Effective immediately. Chloe's face went from white to red. You can't do this. I own the company, Julian said simply. I absolutely can do this. Security will escort you both out. 2 security guards who'd arrived with Julian's team stepped forward. Vivian stood shakily, her heels clicking one final time as she walked toward the exit. The sound that had once struck fear into her employees now sounded hollow and pathetic. At the door, she paused and looked back. I hope you realize what you're doing, she said, some of her old venom returning. Without strong management, this place will fall apart. Those employees need a firm hand. What they need, Julian interrupted, is a manager who sees them as human beings. Something you never learned to do. Vivian opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked out into the San Francisco morning, Chloe trailing behind her, both women suddenly unemployed, suddenly powerless, suddenly exposed. Inside the restaurant, the remaining staff stood in stunned silence. Julian took a breath and turned to face them. I owe all of you an apology, he said. I should have been more present. I should have noticed what was happening here before it got this bad. My grandfather used to say that a CEO's job isn't to sit in an office counting money, it's to ensure that every person in their organization can work with dignity. I failed you. I'm sorry. Chef Marcus stepped forward. Mr. Thorne, if I may, what happened to Elena? Is she okay? Julian smiled for the first time that morning. Elena Rostova is about to have a very interesting day. But first, I need someone to help me find her contact information. I seem to have lost track of it. Several hands shot up. Elena was sitting in her apartment, staring at her laptop and the job search websites that all seemed to be mocking her, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Again. She almost didn't answer. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe the lingering belief in kindness that hadn't quite been extinguished, made her pick up. Hello, Ms. Rostova? This is Marcus Chin from Thorne Hospitality Group. I'm calling on behalf of our CEO, Julian Thorne. Do you have a moment? Elena's heart started pounding. Yes. Excellent. Mr. Thorne would very much like to meet with you this afternoon. We can send a car to pick you up, if that's convenient. I don't understand, Elena said slowly. Why would your CEO want to meet with me? I think that's a conversation better had in person, Marcus said kindly. But I can assure you, Ms. Rostova, this is very good news. The best news, actually. An hour later, Elena found herself in the back of a sleek black car, trying not to touch anything for fear of leaving fingerprints. The driver was polite and professional, answering her nervous questions with gentle humor. They drove to a building in the financial district, all glass and steel and intimidating wealth. Marcus Chin met her in the lobby. He was younger than she'd expected, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Ms. Rostova, thank you so much for coming. Mr. Thorne is waiting upstairs. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like floating. Elena caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls, jeans, a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked exactly like what she was, a broke college student who had no business in a building like this. The elevator opened onto a reception area that was all modern art and expensive furniture. And there, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows with his back to her, was a familiar silhouette. He turned around, and Elena's breath caught. It was him, the man from last night, but transformed. He wore an impeccable suit, and his entire demeanor radiated authority and success. Yet when he smiled at her, it was the same gentle expression from the restaurant. Elena, he said. Thank you for coming. You're Julian Thorne, Elena said stupidly. You're the CEO. I am, Julian confirmed. He gestured to a sitting area. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss. Elena sat, her mind reeling. Last night, that was all. An undercover investigation, Julian finished. I'd been getting reports that our flagship restaurant was struggling. I wanted to understand why. So I went in disguise, to see what regular customers experienced. What staff experienced. He leaned forward, his expression serious. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. And then I found you. I don't understand. You showed me kindness when you had every reason not to, Julian said simply. You sacrificed your own financial security to help a stranger. You stood up to a bully, even though you knew it would cost you everything. That's not just kindness, Elena. That's courage. That's integrity. That's exactly the kind of person I want leading my restaurants. Elena felt dizzy. Leading? Julian pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside this envelope is a formal job offer. I'm not offering you your old position back. You deserve so much more than that. I'm offering you the position of General Manager of Lumiere, with full authority to rebuild the culture and the team. The salary is competitive. More than competitive, actually. There's also a signing bonus that should cover your mother's medication for the next year, your tuition, and anything else you need to get stable. Elena opened the envelope with shaking hands. The numbers on the contract made her head spin. It was more money than she'd imagined making in 5 years, let alone one. I can't, she whispered. Why not? I'm 22 years old. I'm a college student. I've never managed anything in my life except a tight budget and a demanding course schedule. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone else I could hire, Julian interrupted gently. You understand what it means to struggle. You understand the value of kindness. You understand that power should never be used to hurt people. Those aren't things you can learn from a business degree, Elena. Those are character traits. And character is something you can't fake. Elena looked down at the contract, then back at Julian. What happened to Vivian? Fired. Blacklisted. She'll never work in hospitality again. And Chloe? Same fate. Elena should have felt satisfaction, but instead she just felt tired. This all seems like a fairy tale. Like it can't be real. It's real, Julian assured her. And if you accept this offer, I promise you'll have my full support. I'll be hands-on at first, helping you transition. We'll hire new staff together. We'll rebuild Lumiere into something my grandfather would be proud of. A place where excellence and humanity coexist. where luxury means elevating people, not excluding them. Elena read through the contract again. The salary, the benefits, the authority to make real changes. It was everything she'd never dared to dream of. But more than that, it was validation. Proof that her mother had been right, that kindness wasn't weakness. That choosing to help someone, even at great personal cost, could lead to something beautiful. There's one condition, Elena said slowly. Julian raised an eyebrow. Name it. Chef Marcus stays. He's been kind to me since day one. He tried to defend me. Good people like that are rare. Julian smiled. Already done. In fact, Marcus has been promoted to executive chef. He'll be your right hand in rebuilding the kitchen culture. Elena took a deep breath and picked up the pen that lay next to the contract. When do I start? She asked. 3 months later, Lumiere had transformed. The dining room looked the same, still elegant, still beautiful. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Staff smiled genuine smiles. Laughter occasionally echoed from the kitchen. And most importantly, every person who walked through the door was treated with respect, regardless of what they wore or how much money they had. Elena stood in her new office, Vivian's old office, which she'd completely redecorated, reviewing the reservation list for the evening. They were fully booked, with a waiting list. But she'd implemented a new policy. Every night, they held one table for walk-ins. For people who couldn't plan 3 months ahead. For people who just needed a nice meal and a reminder that they mattered. There was a knock on her door. Chef Marcus poked his head in. Got a minute, boss? He asked with a grin. Elena smiled. She still wasn't used to being called boss, but she was learning to accept it. Always. What's up? There's a gentleman at table 7. Says he has a reservation under the name Hoodie. Should I be concerned? Elena laughed and stood up. She knew exactly who it was. Julian Thorne sat at the corner table, the same table he'd occupied 3 months ago, when everything had changed. But tonight he wore a suit, and he wasn't alone. Next to him sat Elena's mother, Maria Rostova, and Elena's younger brother, David. Elena approached the table, her heart full. Welcome to Lumiere, she said formally, though her eyes were dancing. I'm Elena, the general manager. I understand you have a reservation. Julian grinned. I do. And I was hoping the manager might join us for dinner. If she's not too busy running this exceptional establishment. Maria reached out and took Elena's hand. Please, sweetheart. Sit with us. I want to hear all about your day. Elena looked around the dining room. Her dining room. Her restaurant. Her team. Everything was running smoothly. The staff knew what to do. They'd built something good here, something solid. She sat down. Over dinner, they talked and laughed. Julian told embarrassing stories about his early mistakes as CEO. Maria shared memories of Elena as a child, always trying to help everyone, always bringing home stray animals and lonely classmates. David talked about his own dreams of becoming a teacher. And Elena looked around the table at these people who'd become her family, not by blood, but by choice, and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the staff had finished closing, Elena stood alone in the dining room. She thought about Vivian, wondered briefly what had become of her. She'd heard through the grapevine that Vivian was working retail now, humbled and diminished. Elena didn't feel satisfaction about that. She just felt sad that someone had built their entire identity on cruelty and then lost everything when that cruelty finally caught up with them. But mostly, Elena felt grateful. Grateful for a stranger who'd taught her that kindness could be rewarded. Grateful for a second chance. Grateful for the reminder that the arc of the universe really does bend toward justice, even if sometimes it needs a little push. She turned off the lights and locked the door behind her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new moments to choose kindness over cruelty. She was ready.